Our next speaker is Karanja, Muraya. I'll just read a brief intro. He's the Executive Director of the Social Welfare Development Program. He holds a bachelor's degree in Peace Conflict Studies and an MSc in Governance, Peace, and Security. He's also a board member of Breakaway Learning Project, incorporated in Maryland, USA, and an independent consultant with several national and regional organizations in the area of countering violent extremism. He, in 2016, received a recognition from George Washington University for his research work on child abuse. He has authored several journals and articles on international peace and security. Let's give a hand for Karanja.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. I intend to make my presentation brief. I only got to learn that I'm presenting here today, last evening, and therefore I also understand that I'm standing in for the KNHRC director. The issue I'm debating today is to do with young people and their role in preventing or participating in conflict, prevention, resolution, and peace building. I want to begin by looking at some of the presentations that have been made here this morning and recall the words of Mongare, who mentioned that young people are not a problem to be solved. And that resonated very well with my presentation because I had that particular issue when it comes to conflict prevention, peace building, and issues to do with resolution of conflict. But the biggest question that I still have at the back of my mind is, who is a youth? We can stay here the whole day debating the issues to do with young people, but unless we begin by defining who a young person is, we will still be digging in a hole. The issue of who a young person is one that is very contentious, and it runs from one culture to the next, just as well as they say that youth is a social construct. So it actually is defined by people as they wish. So if you go to the United Nations definition of who a young person is 18 up to 29. When you go to the Constitution of Kenya, Article 55, it will tell you that a young person is between the ages of 18 and 35. But if you go to my local church, and probably wherever you also go to church or mosque, they'll tell you that a young person is one who is not married, and therefore is able to participate in a lot of activities in the church as so. Politically also, young people are defined differently because I recently met with young people from Zanzibar, the ones who are playing some football match with Kenya in Nakuru. And they were very, very happy about this country. And they said that the one thing that they admire the very most about this country is that we have a very youthful leaders. So you think of our president and the deputy president as being young people. And you know that that goes way back. We had Kano Youth Wingers and Kano Youth Wing and Youth for YK92. And then sometimes you also wonder whether those people really were between the ages of 18 and 29 or 18 and 35. But that also poses one of the major challenges when you come to the role of young people in conflict prevention, resolution, and peace building. Because young people and being a youth is also mainly looked at being problematic. And in various arenas, there are two main schools of thoughts. And the first one is the one that tends to look or to infantilize young people. Look at them from being infants, being powerless, young people are viewed as being very powerless, being very vulnerable, as needing help, and therefore being incapable of running their lives or being independent. And that particular view poses a challenge, especially for young people's participation in prevention of conflict and activities that gear towards resolution of the same, because young people are never taken seriously. They are seen as people who have to depend on others. They have to really look up to others to be able to make decisions for them. They are seen as people who are not able to take full charge of their lives. Looking at young people as being completely powerless is one school of thought, but there is also another school of thought that tends to demonize young people. And that school of thought tends to look at young people as dangerous subjects, violent and a threat to peace and security. So those are two schools of thoughts that tend to undo a lot of the gain that young people have made over the years trying to fight for space, for civic space, to participate effectively and meaningfully in peace building activities. When you look at some of the frameworks that exist and the mechanisms that support young people's participation in peace prevention, in peace building activities, conflict prevention and resolution, most people tend to look at United Nations Resolution 2250. But there is also a resolution that is very, very interesting. And although I know this is a landmark resolution for young people, United Nations Security Council Resolution 2250 of 2015, because it creates, it gives us the environment as young people to begin to engage in the area of participation, partnership, protection, prevention, disengagement, and reintegration. But there is also a resolution called Resolution 2282 of 2016 that further placed a lot of emphasis on the importance of young people participating in prevention of conflict, in peace building, and issues to do with resolution. And this particular resolution of 2016, coming shortly, about a year after the adoption of Resolution 2250, was just a follow-up after looking at some of the challenges that young people are facing in being able to realize their rightful place in prevention of conflict and in resolution of the same. There is also a very important UN Security Council Resolution 1325 that I would also want to urge ourselves to look at, which also basically talked more about the need for equality or equal participation of all people. And I know this is very popular with people in the gender movement, including myself, where we talk about women, peace, and security. But you also know that young people can either be men or women, boys or girls. And therefore, they are also covered under that particular resolution. However, all these resolutions, unless we are able to implement them and to adopt them here locally, it becomes impossible for young people to still find the space to meaningfully participate in prevention of conflict and peace-building activities. And the question is, when we look around regionally, you begin to wonder, are young people really taking their space? Are young people participating as they should in the prevention of conflict and in peace-building activities? And that is a question I would want us to ask ourselves, not just even looking at regionally, but also looking at ourselves here in Kenya. There is the Building Bridges Initiative, and I'm tempted to ask myself, since this is the most current initiative that aims at peace building in the country, what has been the place and the contribution of young people in building the bridges that we so much need in this country? And that is not the only thing. If you look at the Global Agenda 2030, and specifically the Sustainable Development Goal number 16 on peace and justice and building strong institutions, you begin to realize that, and also looking at that together with the Regional Agenda 2063 of Africa, where Africa seeks to build a cohesive continent that is united, prosperous, and peaceful, you begin to realize that young people have to be able to carve out their niche in some of these agendas, but also riding on these particular resolutions. Resolution 1325, Resolution 2050, and Resolution 2282 are some of the platforms that we need to be able to use to find our ways into Africa Union, to find our ways into East Africa Community, to find our ways into IGAD, to find our ways into building bridges here in the country. I know that it may seem to be impossible, but I know that in this particular platform where we stand here today, a lot of young people who came before us have been able to use this particular platform, and a platform like the one we have been provided for by the Young Diplomats Association to launch their career in diplomacy. And one of those people that I recall very well is Yvonne Kamati. And she also launched her, actually this was where she launched her career into diplomacy, and she's doing very, very well. So we can all take cognizance of that particular opportunity and begin to engage meaningfully with each other, but also with existing mechanisms in the country. I wish to end it there unless there is an issue, but actually before I end, let me just speak to one more challenge that I've seen with young people. When we are being defined, and when we define ourselves, we tend to also fall in the trap that the society, especially here in Kenya, have fallen into, where we look at ourselves as coming from different ethnic groups or from different religions, and therefore young people are never referred to as a homogeneous group. We tend to be looked at as completely heterogeneous. We tend to assume the identity, that multiplicity of identity. We tend to take the identity of where we are coming from. We are either this community or this particular tribe, that particular religion, that particular class, or that particular race. And it begins to become very different for policymakers to understand how best to engage with us. And then the fact that we are looked at as a stage in transition, nobody thinks that we can be taken serious enough. Because by the time you begin to engage a young person, and especially looking at the UN definition of who a young person is, you begin to engage with them when they are this age, and soon they have transited, and probably they are now being looked at as adult. And it's the same thing when you look at the constitutional definition. And so most people and policy makers tend to think that it is very difficult because you cannot work with young people as one homogeneous group. And then the fact that young people, the youth is defined as being socially constructed, nobody can tell exactly who a young person is, tends to make us look very, very fluid. Now, those are some of the issues that tend to make it very, very difficult, chaotic for policymakers to know how best to be able to engage with us. And the sooner we realize that and begin to shepherd ourselves together and to carve out an identity for ourselves, the better. Thank you.